Think about the notebook sitting on your desk. Its crisp white pages feel ordinary, almost invisible, as you jot down a number, sketch an idea, or write a story. But have you ever wondered how something as simple as paper makes this possible? Every sheet tells a story that begins deep in the tangled roots of forests, wins its way through roaring machines, and somehow ends up right in front of you. So, how exactly does a tree transform into a smooth notebook page? Let's follow the journey, step by step, from forest floor to finished product. Long before a sheet of paper meets your pen, it begins as a tree, most often spruce, pine, fir, or eucalyptus. These trees are chosen for a reason. Their fibers are long, strong, and particularly well-suited to becoming pulp that can hold together under heat, water, and pressure. The cycle starts in managed forests, where trees are planted, grown, and harvested in a surprisingly systematic process. Forestry teams track the age and health of each plot, thinning denser areas and planting saplings to maintain a balance between supplying wood and preserving wildlife habitat. When it's time for harvest, heavy machines, harvesters, and forwarders slice through tree trunks like a knife through butter, separating the logs from the branches in a matter of seconds. Each log is trimmed, loaded onto trucks, and transported to the paper mill. But not every part of the tree will become paper. Branches, bark, and leaves are left behind or used in other products, while the straight, clean trunks arrive at the mill ready for transformation. At the mill, the first stop is the debarking process. A spinning drum or high-pressure water jets strip the bark from the logs, since bark contains too many impurities and can weaken the final paper. Stripped of their outer layer, the bare logs move on to the chipping section, where a thundering wood chipper makes quick work of the trunks, dicing them into small uniform chips about the size of a postage stamp. These wood chips hold the secret to paper making: cellulose fibers. But within each chip, those fibers are locked tightly together by lignin, a tough, glue-like substance that gives wood its rigidity. The pulp mill tackles this challenge using two main processes: mechanical and chemical pulping. Mechanical pulping is almost poetic in its brute simplicity. The wood chips are ground down with huge rotating stones, shredding the fibers apart mechanically. This process requires a lot of energy, but retains much of the original lignin, resulting in a pulp that becomes bright but somewhat weaker paper, ideal for newsprint and some packaging. Chemical pulping, on the other hand, is a refined science. Here, the chips are cooked in pressurized tanks called digesters, along with a cocktail of chemicals like sodium hydroxide and sodium sulfide. Over several hours, heat and chemicals break down the lignin, freeing the cellulose fibers. What's left is called Kraft Pulp, which is washed and screened to remove any leftover bits of bark or undissolved wood. This pulp forms the backbone for high-quality papers, strong, flexible, and ready for writing, printing, and drawing. But you can't write on a soggy mass of wood fibers. So, what happens next? The washed and refined pulp looks like a thick, watery oatmeal at this stage, about 99% water and only 1% fiber. This pulp is sprayed onto a fast-moving mesh screen known as the Fourdrinier Machine, which shakes it back and forth as it races along. Water drains away, leaving a thin mat of interlaced fibers. A series of rollers then squeeze and press the wet mat, removing even more water. Finally, the nearly dry web of pulp is fed through heated rollers called calendars, which smooth and flatten it into a long, continuous sheet. Depending on the type of paper being made, the sheet might be coated with clays or resins to give it a glossy surface, or left uncoated for a natural, matte finish. At this point, the paper is wound onto gigantic rolls, sometimes as wide as a city bus and weighing several tons. These master rolls contain thousands of meters of paper, which will be chopped, sliced, and packed to meet different needs. Some rolls are sent to printers and newspapers. Others journey to factories where they'll be cut, bound, and transformed into notebooks, books, or reams of printer paper. Now, here's where things get especially interesting. Not all paper ends up white. To achieve that clean, bright appearance, the pulp must be bleached. In the past, chlorine compounds were common, but environmental concerns have pushed the industry to use safer alternatives like oxygen, hydrogen peroxide, or ozone. These bleaching agents remove any last traces of lignin, preventing the yellowing of the paper over time and yielding the familiar white color we expect. All along this process, quality control is constant and intense. Sensors and cameras scan the moving paper for blemishes, thin spots, or discolorations, ensuring that every meter meets tight specifications. If a flaw is detected, the roll is marked, addressed, or even discarded. Because consistency matters, whether it's for a notebook, a magazine, or the pages of a treasured book. Once the giant rolls are cut and stacked, the paper moves to a conversion plant. Here, precision machines work at lightning speed to trim the paper to size, punch holes for spiral binding, fold pages, or glue covers. Picture an assembly line of metal arms and razor-sharp blades, slicing, stacking, and collating until what started as a pine log now resembles the blank canvas destined for your desk. It's not just brute force. There's artistry in the details. Some notebooks are sewn with thread for added durability. Others are bound with spiral wires, and covers might be made from heavy cardstock or even recycled materials. Each choice, texture, weight, color, finish, translates into a different writing experience when your pen finally hits the page. The story doesn't end after a notebook is filled. In fact, paper remains one of the most recycled materials in the world. Used paper can be collected, shredded, and mixed into new pulp, giving rise to another cycle, a second life, or a third, or a 10th. But even recycled paper relies on some virgin fiber from freshly harvested trees. This is because the fibers get shorter every time they're recycled, eventually losing the strength needed to form a stable sheet. So, when you flip open a notebook, you're holding a layered story. A single sheet may contain fibers from forests across continents, from trees decades old, interwoven with the scraps and scribbles of students, artists, and writers who came before you. Machines, chemistry, and ingenuity have all shaped the page, yet its origins are humble. Just sunlight, rain, and the raw persistence of a growing tree. Let's pause and reflect on a passage from literature that gives new meaning to this ordinary object. Books are the treasured wealth of the world and the fit inheritance of generations and nations. Henry David Thoreau, Walden. Each notebook starts as a blank slate, yet it's already a distillation of the natural world. The ordinary becomes extraordinary when you trace these lines backward, from scribbles on your desk to the roots in a distant forest. Making paper is a story of transformation, of energy, chemistry, and memory. In a way, it's a metaphor for creativity, taking base materials, breaking them down, combining and refining them, and creating something useful, meaningful, and enduring. Sometimes, looking closer at a product we use every day reveals the hidden inventiveness of our species. Paper might seem simple, but its journey is anything but. The next time you flip a fresh page, consider what went into making it. How a tree became fibers, fibers became pulp, pulp became sheets, and sheets became the ideas or sketches you'll leave behind. The story of making paper is a reminder that even the simplest things are the result of incredible complexity and care in an art. From forest management to pulping, from precise machines to human ingenuity, every stage is woven together to create a page that waits to become part of your story. And so, that ordinary notebook on your desk is a tiny intersection of nature, technology, and your own imagination. The cycle continues with each new page, each new thought, and every tree that sets it all in motion.